From folklore and fairies
to monsters and mysteries, it came from the Maritimes. Rattling her chains and floating through walls, my co-host Chelsea.
When the music stops, you'll see him standing in the mirror behind you, my co-host Evan.
Howdy everyone, and welcome to It Came From The Maritimes. Today's topic is the spirited street known as Victoria Street of St. John's, Newfoundland, or Newfoundland's most haunted street. As a warning, this episode discusses death, as do most of our ghost episodes.
I was going to say a haunting episode that discusses death? Evan, don't you dare.
I know. Now, in downtown St. John's, there's a street, only 3 blocks long, that is known to be the most haunted street in St. John's, if not all of Newfoundland. It's difficult to say how you can get such high concentrations of ghosts in such a relatively small area, but sometimes these things just happen.
I have some ideas.
This street is Victoria Street, which was at one time in history known as Meeting House Lane. It was named that as it was where the church's meeting house was originally built in 1780s, but is a place now known as the Longshoremen's Protective Union Building. Over time, the building has burned down twice, once in 1892, in the Great Fire of 1892, and once in the 1920s. And it has been rebuilt multiple times, and since the 1970s has been a hub for music and theater. Over the years, there have been reports from people who attend shows there, or that work there, that they have experienced a presence. In the late 90s or early 2000s, a young man who was very involved in the arts drowned in a pond outside the city. It was a tragic loss for the community, but some people believe that he is still there with them. Shortly after the man's death, there was an occurrence during a performance at the theater. A young woman was watching the show in what she thought was a fairly empty section. Suddenly, she noticed a man beside her, and when she looked at him, she saw him watching and really enjoying himself as the play went on. At the end, as the lights came up, she turned to talk to him, but found an empty seat, which seemed strange as she hadn't seen or heard him leave. She later told someone about the encounter and described him as having long hair and a leather jacket. And this is when she was told that that man had recently passed away and that she may have seen his ghost. He has been seen at other places around the theater, often in the wings or behind the curtains, watching the performance.
Very spooky.
Yeah, so apparently he was a guy especially loved kind of like metal music, stuff like that. So the long hair and leather jacket makes sense. And
I like his style.
Yeah, but was apparently very involved in organizing community events and all that, so.
I'm glad he still gets to enjoy the arts in the afterlife.
And that's the thing, this one's kind of sweet. It's like, you know what, yeah, come on back, enjoy the show. Like, you were really invested in this place when you were alive. Why not enjoy the show afterwards?
Absolutely, you deserve it.
With this, some of the accounts I found gave exact addresses, and I'm not mentioning these because, other than the theater, I don't want anyone just showing up at random houses.
Fair.
There was one other house down the street where there's the story of a ghost of an elderly woman. A man who lived there in his youth shared a story about seeing a ghost of an elderly woman on the stairs. This one's relatively peaceful, but the next one, not so much. In another house, a young couple had rented in the early 1900s. They were just returning to St. John's after living in the US for a couple of years for work. The first night that they stayed there, the wife was awakened in the middle of the night by piercing shrieks. She sat up and saw 2 women, both of whom she had known to be dead, fighting at the end of her bed.
Oh my goodness.
One woman was grabbing the other by the hair and dragging her around the room, which is likely why the screaming was so loud.
Oh my gosh, the full-on brawl.
I know. After realizing what she was seeing, the wife passed out and didn't awaken until daybreak. The couple packed their belongings and moved out the same day, but their rent was not returned.
I'd be fighting that in small claims court.
I know. I mean, it was the early 1900s, so a little bit. That was before Newfoundland was part of Canada even, so.
True. Different times.
Yeah, different thing altogether. My final story of the street includes a 3-story house that was being rented out by 3 men. One of the encounters that they had was when only one man was home. He heard someone run in and up the stairs to the top floor before slamming the door. The tenant assumed that his roommate was in a rush and didn't pay it any mind. His other roommate returned and said he was looking for the third, the one who lived on the top floor. So they went up to the top floor, the third floor, to look for him, but they found the room to be empty. When the roommate did return home, they asked him about it, and he reported being out all day. The top floor seemed to be where the spirits wanted to be in this house. As one night, the man who lived in the room on the top floor heard knocking at his door. He went to the door, checked it, found no one was there, and assumed that his roommate must have been looking for something but found it or something like that. He got back in bed, but he heard the knocking again. He got out of bed again, opened the door, and again found no one there. This time, a little unimpressed, a little angry.
Fair.
He heard the knocking again as soon as he got into bed, and this time he was like, okay, they must be pranking me or something. I'm just going to let them go and they'll tire themselves out. But the knocking persisted. It continued on the door for a couple of minutes, and then it started to move down the hall along the wall of the room. The man assumed that was still his roommates playing a prank on him, but was less certain of that when the knocking went to the wall that was at the external part of the building. He was pretty concerned then, and he got up and looked out the window and saw a ghostly hand knocking on his window. Upon seeing the hand, the knocking stopped, and he wasn't bothered for the rest of the night.
Nightmare.
Yeah, not ideal. I'd be pretty spooked if I saw that.
That's my biggest fear. Like, I just don't look out windows at night because
That's fair.
Oh.
Since this one again was a little bit of a shorter one, I'm going to share one more St. John's paranormal story that I found in my research. This wasn't on the same street, and honestly it's a little hard to track down exactly where this building was. Some people say it's where the post office is today. Earlier I mentioned the Great Fire of 1892, which, as the name suggests, was a large fire that destroyed a large part of St. John's at the time, including the hotel mentioned in this story. The Foran Hotel was known to be an elegant hotel with a great reputation. That reputation started to go downhill because one night, as hotel guests were sleeping, a loud knocking was coming from an empty room on the 4th floor, the top story of the building. So it seems like a lot of these weird knocking things are happening on the top floor, because same as the last one.
Yeah.
That was the top floor of the building.
The spirits love the penthouse life.
I guess so. The noise was so loud that it woke up every guest in the building, and it kept going on until some staff entered the room, and then it immediately stopped and didn't happen again that night. The next night, the same knocking happened from the same empty room, and again stopped when someone checked. This happened again, and by the 4th night, they knew that their guests were pretty unhappy, so they put a guard by the room. And the knocking seemed to stop. They didn't have it happen that night, so they decided to lock up the room, and after that, the problem didn't really reoccur for a while. Months later, the knocking still hadn't happened, and the staff were happy with that. They had a full hotel, with the exception of the board of the locked up room, when a man from out of town walked in asking if they had a vacancy. They decided, hey, things have been fine for so long, we can put him in the knocking room, and prepared it for the guest. He went to bed, and all seemed fine, until an hour later that night, they heard the knocking again, but even louder than previously. Staff knew where it was coming from and rushed to the room, where they found the man dead, but cold as if he had been dead for much longer than possible.
Was he the ghost?
I think the implication is just that he was killed in a mysterious way, because his body was still there.
True. Maybe this is a time loop situation.
Maybe. Well, you know what? It did not, where I got this story from did not account for time loop situations, so we'll need to look into that.
I'll review and elaborate.
Sounds good. Now, after the man was discovered, there was a persistent light rapping, just like a little knock. Not enough to disturb anyone outside the room, but just noticeable. And it said that it was sustained until the moment that the man's corpse exited the threshold of the building. The room was boarded up and never used again. There's some theory stating that the postal office was built at the site of the old hotel. People have reported strange occurrences and hearing knocking sound on the top floor of the building.
Ooh.
I know, kind of a spooky one.
I like those stories.
No, I know, right? But yeah, so that's our haunted street and then a little extra haunted hotel there for you. Now I'm going to end this episode with a segment. We're going back some. I mean, I know you did some Would You Rather last time. This is more of a classic Would You Rather from early on, something I thought of early in the making of this podcast, but kind of just sat in the side. But this is going to be kind of related to mythical creatures.
Exciting.
And it's would you rather eat the egg of a roc, which is a mythical bird I'll explain in a minute here, or a phoenix? Now, there's going to be a couple of things. Give me a minute to explain myself. A roc is a Middle Eastern mythological bird. It's seen in some of the old stories, and it's known to be large enough to pick up and fly away with elephants. And their eggs were described as being the size of 150 chicken eggs.
My goodness.
So that would be a lot of eating, but a lot of protein too.
That's it, all that nutrition.
Now, a phoenix is a firebird that at the end of its life will burn and a new chick will rise from the ashes. So technically, the egg would just be a pile of ashes. But maybe, like, what do those taste like? I'm curious. Do they taste a little bit like poultry? Do they taste a little bit like eggs? Or does it just taste like regular ashes? So would you rather eat a really, really big egg or some ashy egg flavored ash?
I'm going to go with the rock egg.
That's very fair.
Reliable flavor, but just a lot of it.
I know. I mean, I will say that's a lot of eating.
It is. I'm up for the challenge.
I'm glad to hear. I mean, I used to, I remember there was a guy on YouTube that I watched a video from, and he was a bodybuilder, but he used to be a competitive eater. And he would start each day eating a dozen eggs, but then like also an extra dozen egg whites.
That's so many eggs.
That's the thing. And he was like, oh yeah, it gets a little tough to eat this many eggs, so I had a little bit of hot sauce.
I feel like you need a whole lot of hot sauce to get that many down. And I love eggs.
That's the thing. I was like, that's a lot of eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for playing my Would You Rather. I mean, I don't have as many spooky ones like you, but...
Oh, that's okay. Honestly, that one, I never would have guessed those were going to be my choices. So thank you for giving me a genuine surprise today.
Anytime. And if anyone has any big opinions, please write them into us. Comment on our social media. Let us know.
Yeah, we'll put a poll up.
There you go. And with that being said, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of It Came From The Maritimes. You can find us on social media on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok at It Came From The Maritimes, on Blue Sky at ICFT Maritimes. And if you have any Atlantic Canada folklore you'd like to see covered in a future episode, or any spooky encounters of your own, email us at itcamefromthemaritimes@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon if you want to check out some bonus content. And if you enjoy our podcast, please leave a 5-star review. It helps people find us. Now, as always, we have a folklore tip to end the episode. Chelsea, would you like to share that for us?
I would. According to East Coast superstition, 2 lamps on a table will cause a death within 24 hours.
Oh my, you gotta spread out those lamps.
You do. Thanks for listening.
Bye.